You realize this is my closet, right? Well, you're not leaving, because it's time for the weekly roundup. Today, that is this week, we read some out of Pride and Prejudice. Doesn't need any introduction. Probably not, but you can look it up, I guess, if you need. For these videos, if there's something particularly striking about a book, I'd like to maybe focus in on that one thing. But I think it was a little disparate for this one. Nothing bad about the book, for sure. Great book. But it just happened so that, the attention was really pulled in a lot of directions. So I think I'm just going to, this time, just, do three little things. And, maybe give some examples for them and see what Austen was doing well, what she was doing poorly. The first one is this idea of being redundant while using the narrator's voice and being cautious of that. Now, as soon as you open up this book and start reading the first chapter, you find that Austen's great, really great at characterizing her characters with dialogue. You get these just 2 pages, nothing but dialogue, hardly dialogue tags. And it's wonderful, You feel these people. You feel like you're there listening to them. And you hardly get very many cues from the narrator. But then she comes in at the end of the chapter with this odd paragraph. Not really odd, but in a sense it is odd when you think about it. It reads, Mr. Bennet was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. When she was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. The solace was visiting and news. That's the end of the first chapter. So if you just break open the book and read this first chapter, it's 3 pages, you can maybe get a better idea of what I'm talking about. But just based off of that, looking at this paragraph, we see just a lot of stuff where it's so it begins, Bennett was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice. It's you just saw that in the dialogue already. Right, that came up right before this paragraph. So it's why is he saying that? Why is she saying that, rather? Why not have the sentence just be that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character, and cut out that first part that's already implied. And then secondly, just moving on to the description of Mrs. Bennet. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. That's stuff that was, if not already implied, will soon be implied by, just how she talks, how she carries herself, whatnot. When she was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. Okay, there you get some sort of an insight into her, this weird quirk about her. But what do you have to say that now? And then the business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news. And again, it's those last 2 or 3 sentences are just why are you saying this when this could just over the next couple times we interact with Mrs. Bennet, we could just see this play out, as we do see it play out. And so it's the information is correct. It makes sense with the story. It's just redundant. So I think it's just a good warning to be am I as a narrator just imposing this really bland information on the narrative that doesn't need to be there in my narrator's voice? Because if it's already there, maybe the narrator shouldn't explicitly say it. The next idea is a pretty simple one. She has great character descriptions, but occasionally she falls into this trap of just having an adjectival character. Of just so-and-so was a handsome man. Now, look, I'm not going to say adjectives are evil, that they're just bad or anything, but if you're introducing a character who's important to the story, and is going to continue being important to the story, maybe you don't want to just describe him with just an adjective like handsome, because that doesn't really mean much. Handsome isn't a specific image. And I know there's a point where like the reader's imagination has to take over for the text and like kind of build this character and exactly what they look like. But just the word handsome, that can really go anywhere. And you're wasting so much opportunity to kind of like imply stuff about this person, about how their faces, how they like express themselves with their face, like how they hold themselves. So just like these adjectival characters, I think are, if the character's important enough, kind of wasted potential. The third thing has to do with sentence construction. And there's obviously a lot you can talk about with sentence construction, but came across one interesting example. Later on in the book, that's, I think, that at least helps me understand, like, how can the structure of a sentence actually change, like, the meaning or the feeling of the sentence. Because sometimes it seems a little absurd when people say that. I'm like, I don't know, that's kind of a stretch. But I think here we have a great example. Here we have, like, this, nice spring day carriage ride through a meadow. And you get the sentence, they gradually ascended for a half-mile, then found themselves at the top of a considerable eminence, where the wood ceased. The eye was instantly caught by Pemberley House, situated on the opposite side of the valley into which the road with some abruptness wound. Now this sentence caught my attention because I thought it would be natural to end the sentence at the eye was instantly caught by Pemberley House, period. It's building up to this fact that you see Pemberley House, but it doesn't, and it just keeps on going. It's situated on the opposite side of the valley into which the road with some abruptness wound. And when I thought about that, I was like, that kind of makes sense. It fits this leisurely tone. It's not like it kind of builds up to Pemberley House. Just listening to how the sentences worked. They gradually ascended for half a mile, and then found themselves at the top of a considerable eminence. So it's like, obviously, you have the image of coming over a hilltop, where the wood ceased. That's a phrase in commas, so it's kind of giving you a pause, building a little bit of tension. And the eye was instantly caught by Pemberley House. So it's like, have this climactic structure. As much as a sentence can without being, over the top. But then it just keeps on going with situated on the opposite side of the valley into which the road with some abruptness wound. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, that just makes sense. If you're supposed to have this leisurely tone, it would be odd to have a climactic sentence. Also, how this sentence doesn't just come to its climax and to stop, kind of fits this idea of like coming over the hilltop, and then like the view just like slowly expands before you. You get this like this wide vista in front of you instead of just Pemberley House. So hopefully, for people like myself who have a hard time understanding like stuff like that in regards to form and content of like, why does the form of my sentence matter? Hopefully that's a good example. But yeah, so though there's some like thoughts I had on like more on the micro side rather on the macro side of this novel, even though I think it does a great job on both fronts. So yeah, hopefully that was interesting. If you think anything I've said is like kind of vague in this video, that's probably fair. Two things: you could watch the stream where I'm like reading it live, just reading it bit by bit and like kind of breaking it down, try to figure out why it works, why it doesn't work. Or better yet, just maybe get the book yourself, and this is one I would recommend for sure. Just to anyone. But yeah, so that's it. Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen. Thanks for watching.